Hi guys, it's Miss Thompson with another science video. This is going to be a video that goes with last Tuesday, March 31st, as well as Tuesday, April the 7th, because I was not able, with internet problems and things, to get a video to you last week. So going back to what we had done with insects and invertebrates, I had promised to give you guys the answers to this page right here. I told you guys you didn't have to send it to me, but most of you did, so I'm going to go ahead and give everybody an A for doing it. So you had two insects and you were practicing the life cycles of the insect. The top one, the cockroach, was incomplete metamorphosis. You had your eggs, your nymph. The first picture was a small nymph after it had just hatched out of the egg. The second picture was a larger nymph, and then you had your adult cockroach, and that's incomplete metamorphosis. Your next picture at the bottom of the page was a butterfly, and butterflies go through complete metamorphosis. So you had your eggs, your larva, your pupa, and your adult. The larva is also called a caterpillar. The pupa is called a chrysalis in butterflies and a cocoon in moths. And then, of course, you had your adult butterfly, and that is complete metamorphosis. Be listening carefully because that word metamorphosis is going to come back up today in the rest of our lesson. So the next thing I asked you to do this week was to look specifically at the body systems in vertebrates. And I sent you some circles on a page which we call concept maps. It's a way of outlining information so that you can see your main term in the big circle, and the little circles that come out from it have words that go with it. The first system that we talked about was the circulatory system, and it's very important because the circulatory system pumps the blood throughout the animal's body, and the animal needs blood to provide it with oxygen and food. In the circulatory system, one of the main organs is the heart, and depending on what group of vertebrates you're talking about, each group has a different number of chambers in its heart. A two-chambered heart is fish, so that was one of your blanks that you filled in. A three-chambered heart is reptiles and adult amphibians. And what I mean by that is we're going to talk more about amphibians later in this lesson. But when a frog is born, it is born in the water and it breathes with gills. A tadpole breathes with gills. When the frog changes from the tadpole to an adult frog, it gets lungs. When it gets lungs, it's able to breathe outside of the water. And then a four-chambered heart is for birds and mammals. So we have talked before about how humans are a special group of animals, but for a scientific definition, the best group to put us in is mammals. So like mammals, humans have a four-chambered heart. The next body system that you had on your chart was the respiratory system, and that is the system that takes in the oxygen and puts out the carbon dioxide. Fish breathe with gills, and baby frogs, tadpoles, breathe with gills. And then lungs, reptiles, birds, and mammals breathe with lungs. The reason I didn't put amphibians on this chart is because they breathe with gills and lungs. The next body system is the nervous system. The nervous system is divided into two parts. You have the central nervous system, which is your brain and your spinal cord. Central makes you think of the middle of the body because your head is in the center and your spinal cord comes down your back in the center of your body. And then the peripheral nervous system contains the nerves, that's blank number 9, and the sense organs. And your sense organs would be things like your nose and your ears and your mouth and your fingers for your sense of touch. So all of those things are connected by nerves to your central nervous system. They're connected to your brain and your spinal cord. The next body system was the digestive system, and the digestive system includes the stomach, the small intestine, the large intestine, and the liver. And attached to the circle with the liver, those blanks are the pancreas and the gallbladder. I believe I gave you those as blanks. The pancreas and the gallbladder are not parts of the liver, but they work with the liver to help break down food. Your liver stores fat for your body, and the gallbladder helps to digest fat. And the pancreas secretes enzymes that work with the liver and help break down the glucose. You know, we've talked before about how food that we eat is turned into glucose. A lot of food that we eat is made out of sugar, and the sugar is turned into glucose in our bodies. Well, the pancreas is what secretes the insulin and the enzymes that you need to break that down. And so the pancreas, liver, and gallbladder work together. The last body system that I gave you a concept map of was the excretory system, which is the part of your body that eliminates the waste. So that includes your kidneys and your bladder, and the bladder has a tube called the urethra that goes outside of your body. And then the large intestine also pushes waste out of your body and pushes it into the anus. And so those are the body systems that all vertebrates have in common. Then the book went into the different groups of body, different groups of vertebrates. And so in this chapter, we talked about 3 groups of vertebrates: fish, amphibians, and reptiles. And all 3 of these groups are what they call ectothermic. That means that whatever is around the animal, their body temperature reflects that. If the water is cold, a fish will be cold. If the water is hot, a fish will be warm. So because of that, the fish's body activity will change. Just like you think of a bear hibernating in the winter, fish and amphibians, if it gets really cold, their bodies will slow down. They'll go into a state kind of like sleep, where their body can conserve heat, and they'll slow down until it warms up. And so fish and amphibians do a type of hibernation. If it gets really hot in the spring or the summer, these animals can slow down, and their bodies can slow down again. They can go down to the bottom of the water where it's cooler. They might bury themselves in the mud, something like that. And that is called estivation. If it's hot and their bodies are resting because it's too hot, it's called estivation. If it's cold and their bodies are resting because it's too cold, it's called hibernation. Fish reproduce by spawning. The females release the eggs, and then the male swims past and lets out the sperm cells to fertilize the eggs in the water. And so there's usually lots and lots more eggs that are put out than that actually live to become adult fish, because other animals eat them and things like that. There's actually 3 groups of fish. You have the jawless fish. You've got pictures of those on 288 in your textbook. The jawless fish look sort of like big tubes with suckers. An example is a lamprey and a hagfish. And they almost look like worms or something with a sucking mouth because they don't have jaws. Another group of fish are the cartilaginous fish, like a shark. Sharks have a skeleton, but their skeleton is not made of bone, it's made of cartilage. If you touch your nose or your ears, that's cartilage. So their skeletons are not made out of bone, but they're a lot heavier and stronger than an exoskeleton, and their skeletons are inside their bodies. So sharks are considered vertebrates. Also, manta rays and stingrays are in this group. But the last group of the fish, and the one that they told you a lot about when they talked about the spawning and the different things, is the bony fish. And I'm sending you guys a picture of a diagram of the outside of a fish's body, just so that you can see how different their outside of their bodies are than ours. They are covered with scales. The scales on their bodies overlap to help keep them warm. You'll also notice that the fish, all of the fins have different names. Every part of their body that has a fin on it, all the fins have different names. And so the outside of their bodies are very different from, say, a reptile, an amphibian, a bird, or a mammal. Also, you can remember, or you should remember, that fish have a two-chambered heart. They have to pull oxygen out of the water, and that's how they breathe. The swim bladder helps the fish to float at a constant depth. It's full of air, and the fish uses it to move to different depths in the water. A shark does not have a swim bladder. They do breathe by gills, and they are able to maintain their depth by keeping, they have another way of keeping afloat, and that is that their liver is really oily and less dense than the water, and that helps them to be buoyant. It helps them to float, helps their bodies to float. The next group of animals in this chapter were the amphibians, and amphibian means double life. The amphibians actually live 2 cycles in their life, and we have talked about the word metamorphosis. Remember, I told you that word was going to come up again today. Well, frogs go through a type of metamorphosis, and so do salamanders and newts, which are also amphibians. They start out as eggs that are laid in the water, and when they are born, they breathe with gills. They can't come out of the water and live on land. They have to filter oxygen out of the water with their gills. When the tadpole grows older, it loses its gills, and they're changed into lungs. It loses its tail, and it grows legs. Then an adult frog can spend part of its time in the water and part on the land. There are some frogs that spend most of their time in the water, but they still have to come out of the water to catch a breath, because now they breathe with lungs. Very close looking to frogs are toads. Toads spend most of their life on the land, and they might go into the water sometimes, but they prefer to live on land. Another difference that I read about frogs and toads is that frogs lay their eggs in a cluster in the water. Toads lay their eggs in the water, but they lay them in a chain. But they both go through the metamorphosis, where they start as a tadpole and lose their tail, gain lungs, and grow legs. I'm also sending you some pages that I found that you can add to your notebooks that just shows the body systems inside the frog. I just thought these were really interesting. When you are in high school, you will dissect a frog. We don't do that in life science in middle school. But if you are interested in seeing a demonstration of a dissection, you can look it up online and you can find dissection of frogs on videos where you can see what all these organs in the frog look like. When I dissected a frog in high school, we had one group that had a frog that had just had a meal, so it had a roach inside of its stomach. Some of our frogs were females, and so the abdominal cavity was filled with the eggs that they were going to lay. So it's very exciting when you get to dissect a frog in middle school. In high school. I wish we could do it in middle school. The next group that was in this chapter is the reptiles. And reptiles have a different kind of skin from amphibians. Amphibians have a very smooth feeling skin. Reptiles have a scaly skin, but their scales are not as rough as the scales of fish. Their skin is more bumpy. Reptiles do have a backbone inside their body. Snakes and lizards both have backbones. Also in the reptile group are your turtles and your tortoises, including your sea turtles and your alligators and your crocodiles. The most famous example of reptiles would be the dinosaurs that we don't have on Earth anymore, but we do have the skeletons and bones and remains of them. Those were the largest reptiles that ever lived. Reptiles are also ectothermic. You'll see snakes that sometimes come out when it's warm to get sun. They'll come up on a rock, pull themselves out of the pond or the river to get some sun to warm their bodies. But if they get too warm, they have to get back in the water because their body temperature constantly changes because of the environment around them. Reptiles, like snakes and lizards, usually lay eggs for reproduction. There are some snakes that have live babies, but most lay eggs. The eggs have a soft, leathery shell, and the mother usually digs a hole, lays the eggs in it, and then crawls away. So the babies don't have any contact with their mothers when they're born. That would be the same with fish and amphibians. The eggs are laid, and when the babies are born, they take care of themselves. Reptiles breathe with lungs. Reptiles don't have a two-part life cycle. They don't go through metamorphosis. When a snake is born, it looks just like an adult snake, but as the snake grows, it has to molt because its scales, its skin, don't change and grow with its body. Now, fish scales, their bodies grow, and they don't shed their skin. Their scales grow with their bodies. But snakes, lizards, alligators, crocodiles, their skin does not grow with their body. They have to shed their skin and get a new one. They have to molt their skin. But they breathe with lungs. They never breathe with gills. And of course, we know that turtles are a reptile group that has a shell that it uses for protection. Some turtles live all of their lives in the sea or in the water, and some live on the land. The ones that live on land are usually called tortoises. Your book also gives you some differences between alligators and crocodiles. For example, crocodiles have a longer snout and their teeth show when their mouths are closed, but alligators have a shorter mouth or a shorter snout, and when their mouths are closed, you don't see their teeth from the side. Also, your book makes a point of letting you know that not all snakes are poisonous. People think of all snakes as being slimy. They're not. Their skin is dry and bumpy, and they think of all of them as being dangerous. Some snakes that are not poisonous could bite you, but the bite, they wouldn't put any poison in your body when they bit you. Most snakes are not venomous. Also, in the vertebrate group, we're going to start with next week's assignments. You're going to be studying the birds. And birds are different from reptiles, amphibians, and fish because birds are endothermic. Their body can regulate its temperature. Mammals also are endothermic. Our bodies can regulate our temperature. So one of the things you're going to get this week for an assignment is a crossword puzzle on the birds. You're also going to be reading some pages about birds and filling out filling in some questions about birds. I'm not sending you a lot of assignments this week because you are turning in your science projects this week. If you were not able to complete the science project because of everything that's going on, I understand that. But everyone is still required to send me a one-page report, either on hydroponics or plants and fertilizer or how pollution affects plants. If you did a lab report because you were able to do your science project, send me the lab report and you'll get just an extra grade. If you did some kind of photographs or a journal or something where you kept records because you were raising the plants, then you can send me that too. Those things are not due until April 14th. So they're not due until next Tuesday. But this video is going with the lesson for this Tuesday, April 7th. So I'm just reminding you what's coming up. So this week you'll have a puzzle on birds. You'll have a fill-in on the life cycle of the amphibian and some questions. And then you'll be sending me your report stuff. I think you'll really enjoy learning about the birds. The chapter includes the parts of an egg, and it talks about how birds are able to fly and how their bones are different from the bones of mammals, and it makes their bodies lightweight. It also talks about how feathers are formed and what the job of the feathers are and what they do to protect the bird. So I think you'll really enjoy reading about that. If you have any questions about anything, please let me know by email or text, or you can call me. I don't mind. I want you guys to have a good week. Make sure you get your science projects done by next Tuesday, April 14th, or at least your report. And I miss you so much, and I hope that I will get to see you again at the end of the school year. Bye.